So we just had this bill pass, right? We now have this new healthcare legislation. We have this bill that became a law, as we remember from Schoolhouse Rock. And it was great, right? It did, I think it was great. Some people may be disinclined to believe that. But even if you don't think it was great, I'm not only speaking to this is not a partisan speech, but in this country we have a problem with healthcare, and it's not just a problem with providing coverage, not just having access to health coverage, but we also have a problem with health in its very basic measure of, do we have good health? When we talk about health in this country, in fact, the way we talk about health, the way we deliver health information is all of these things that we should be doing, right? All of these rules, and we actually know a lot, we know a huge amount. As you just heard from Scott, it's amazing the stuff that we know about our health and medicine. But the way we deliver this information is didactic. It's telling us that we should be doing something, oftentimes that we shouldn't be doing something, and we're already kind of behind the curve, right? It is not an engagement with the information. We're failing to engage people with their health. We're failing to get people to care about their health. And in fact, health provokes anxiety for many of us. There was this one study that I came across that's rather extraordinary. When you think about health behaviors, we all pretty much know what we're supposed to do. But in fact, when you look at 4 basic health behaviors, don't smoke, get some regular exercise, maintain a healthy body weight, and don't drink too much alcohol, only 3% of Americans manage to do all 4 of those on a consistent basis. I myself am probably part of that 97%. I may drink a little too much, I may not get enough exercise, I don't smoke, but we all kind of basically have things that we could be doing better for our health. And so the challenge is, what do we do wrong? Or how do we change what we're doing wrong into something that we do right? Now, I'm from San Francisco, and I don't mean to pick on Dodgers fans, but clearly the problem is, I don't put this slide up here as a joke. The problem is not just one of individual decision making, but it's decision making that we're making for our families. This is what Jamie Oliver was talking about, right? We're engaging in this kind of system of decision making that is leading to negative consequences, not just for ourselves, but for our families. And this is where we get this, what I call a cascade of comorbidities. And so 70% of Americans are overweight or obese. But then quickly it moves on to diabetes. You get these more chronic conditions, heart disease, and ultimately stroke. And what you're looking at is actually 70% of Americans are dying of chronic disease. So 70% of Americans are dying of things that we couldn't totally prevent them, but we actually have some influence. We could put our fingers on the scale and affect the outcomes. And we're not doing it enough. We're not doing it often enough. Even though we have all this information, right? We know what we're supposed to be doing. We're just not doing it. And as Jamie Oliver mentioned in his speech, life expectancy in this country is actually trending downwards in certain pockets. In certain counties of certain states, you have declining life expectancy. Now, in public health, that is a terrifying statistic, right? We have had 100 years, 150 years of increasing life expectancy, and then all of a sudden, without any reason in terms of the progress of science or the progress of medicine, but for something else, the arrow's starting to move in the other direction. That should be an alarming thing, not just in public health and not just for physicians, but to all of us as citizens. So that's the negative stuff. I want to put that aside. That's the problem. Now I want to put on a bright face and talk about 3 experiments that might bode towards another approach to healthcare that may in fact be able to change some of those trends. So 3 experiments. The first one takes place actually in London. So I want to take us to London. This is Whitehall Street. It's the epicenter of British government. So when we think about Washington, here in England, they call it Whitehall. It's a street. At the end of the street there, you can see Big Ben. Those are the halls of Parliament. Around the corner here is 10 Downing Street, where the Prime Minister's residence is. These and the buildings up and down Whitehall Street are lined with all the government agencies and government offices, the Labor Department, all those things. The reason that Whitehall Street is important is because in 1967, they did a study. Some researchers came to Whitehall, and they wanted to study not the causes of heart disease. They wanted to understand who is at risk for heart disease. So the reason Whitehall Street was their test case, or their test bed, was because it was what they called exquisitely stratified, right? So we all know that British have had a caste or a class system not quite a caste system, but a class system. And Whitehall Street reflected that. The civil service department or the civil service population in the British government reflected that perfectly. It was very strictly divided into 5 classes. There was the executive class at the very top. There was a professional class, an administrative class, a clerical class, the secretaries and whatnot. And then at the very bottom, the 5th segment was the other category, what they called an other category. These were the messengers, the janitors. And so this was a great way, a great microcosm of a stratified society. And so they could see, they wanted to study them for, again, who was at risk. So they took 18,000 men, 18,000 members of the British civil service from all these ranks, and they worked them up. They checked their body weight, they checked out their pulse, their heart rate, and they tracked them over a number of years. It was a 7-year experiment that now actually they're in their almost 40th year. So it's a huge success, and this is why. The reason it's an amazing experiment is because what they discovered was that almost immediately, within the first year or two, that the people at the bottom in this other category were showing up 5 times the risk of dying of heart disease as the people at the top. Right? So the people at the bottom had a profoundly stronger correlation with heart disease and mortality than the people at the top. If you were in the top, something was protecting your life. So some of the things that might explain this were known, right? So smoking. They knew that smoking had an increased risk of heart disease, so they factored that out of the equation. They factored out diet. They factored out exercise. Some of those things correlated with class. But after they factored out everything that they knew about risks for heart disease, they were still left with twice the risk. So the people at the bottom still had twice the risk of dying of heart disease as the people at the top. And there was no known explanation for this, right? They had eliminated every possible explanation. What they were left with, after mulling over this conclusion for several years, was the simple correlation of status itself. The fact that the people at the bottom were at the bottom was, in fact, what was probably driving the fact that they had heart disease. And, in fact, were dying of heart disease. What they thought, the way they talked about it was in terms of control. The term that they used was control of destiny. The people at the bottom had very little control of their destiny. They were subject to the decisions of everybody above them. While the people at the very top, they were the decision makers, right? They were in charge. They had this great sense of autonomy and control. And that's a kind of profound thing. And what we actually deal with this, that was Britain, but we deal with this in our country. When we call customer service, when we get hooked up with a room like this, right? And these people, this is not a good job, right? You are timed for every phone call you make, and then somebody calls and up pops a script, and you have to talk to them exactly to the script. And if you talk to them too long, you get penalized. It's a really bad job. And it's really bad because they have very little control. They have almost no control over their destiny. So that's really what it feels like to be out of control. On the other hand, we know what it's like to be in control. We know what it's like to be really on top of things, right? We have all these great terms for it. We're surfing the wave, like this guy. We're in the flow. We're in the zone. We like that feeling. The trick is, how do we get that feeling? How do we get that feeling about our health? So that takes me to the second experiment. The second experiment takes place in an orthodontic clinic in Kansas City, Missouri. So there's some students here. So they had 40 kids at this orthodontic clinic who they identified as being really bad at brushing their teeth. So these were 40 kids who had braces, like this young woman, and they just wouldn't brush their teeth. They took photographs of their plaque coverage, and they realized that they had about 70% of their teeth coverage was covered with plaque. So it was pretty bad. So they divided this group of 40 in half. 20 of them, they didn't even tell they were going to be an experiment. They just they were the control group. The other 20, they gave this super experimental toothpaste. It was a tube of toothpaste that was all white, except on the side it said experimental in big black letters. And they sent them home, and they said, use this toothpaste every day, twice a day, brush your teeth for 2 minutes at a time. That's what we're all supposed to do. We know that. But come back in 3 months, and we'll examine your teeth. And the control group was also scheduled to come back in 3 months. So after 3 months, rather profoundly, the experimental group, the ones using the special toothpaste, had reduced their plaque coverage to 50%. So they'd gone from 70% down to 50%. The control group actually had gotten a little worse. They were even brushing their teeth less. They had gone up to 80%. So you had this rather profound difference between the control group and the people using this experimental toothpaste. Now the question is, what was that toothpaste? And it was Crest with fluoride, right? It was ordinary Crest. The point was not at all what was in that toothpaste. The point was instead that these kids thought that they were being observed. They knew they were in an experiment and they were being observed. And that was a very important thing. That's, in fact, it's a well-known phenomenon in science. It's called the Hawthorne Effect. And it's this thing that comes out of the Hawthorne Works factory. It was an experiment done in the 1920s. It was a factory that was making electrical relays. And what they wanted to see was if they changed the lights, if they made the lights brighter or dimmer, would the workers make more relays? And what they realized was whether they turned the lights up or they turned the lights down, they made more relays. What happened was the lights would shift, the workers knew the experiment was in effect, and they worked harder. So this has been known as the Hawthorne Effect, right? It's this kind of, it's actually something of a problem in medical research and public health research because it tends to gum up an experiment. When you have a drug trial, for instance, people tend to behave a little bit differently, whether they're on the actual experimental drug or not. It's related to the placebo effect. What was really cool, though, about this orthodontic clinic in Kansas City was they decided to put that Hawthorne effect to work. Right? Rather than try to factor it out of the experiment, they said, let's use it. Let's use it to try to change these kids' behavior. And lo and behold, it worked. So the third experiment that I want to go through takes place in the bathroom. It takes place actually in 5,000 bathrooms around the country. I want to talk about this National Weight Control Registry. It's an experiment it's actually an observational study, technically, that's a technical term, where they got 5,000 people who had successfully lost weight and kept it off for at least a year. So they had lost at least 30 pounds and kept it off for a year. So if you want to know what is the secret to losing weight, these are the people you want to study. What they realized is that there were some things that they had in common that we pretty much already know. They tended to exercise a little bit better, they tended to eat a little bit better, watch what they ate, but they also tended to step on the scale more often. So 80% of them stepped on a scale at least once a week, and 50% of them, fully half of them, stepped on a scale at least once a day. And the fact that they were monitoring themselves, that they were actually constantly checking their progress, was a really strong, in fact, as strong a correlation with successful weight loss as changes in diet and changes in exercise. So those are the three experiments. So this is one woman who did it every day. She changed her socks every day. So, and she took a picture and put it on Flickr, and so I grabbed it for free. Anyway, so what do we make of these, right? What do we make of these three experiments? So if we take this idea of control of destiny that we get out of the Whitehall experiment, the idea of the Hawthorne effect and observing our behavior and trying to actually turn in the experiment to our benefit, and then we combine it with this idea of self-monitoring, we actually get a pretty powerful correlation. The idea becomes a very simple one. In fact, that when we have an opportunity to engage in our health and to monitor our health, we tend to have better health. And this is borne out not just in these experiments, but a whole host of other experiments. When people are given an opportunity to participate in their decision making, whether it's preventive decisions or actually treatment decisions, when we're given an opportunity to engage in our health, we tend to have better outcomes. It's not a guarantee. Nothing's sure in life, especially not in our health. But on average, people have a stronger correlation with better health. That's a really powerful thing. And that's a very big idea, to echo the theme of the day. This plays on two things. What's happening here is it's a feedback loop, right? We're taking information about ourselves and we're putting it into this loop and being able to drive towards better behaviors. And that's a very strong and really amazing tool. The other thing is groups. So when we exchange information in groups and are able to share it and build on it and actually contribute to an aggregated base of information, that becomes even more powerful. That's really what Weight Watchers does. We heard about Weight Watchers this morning. These are the two secrets to Weight Watchers: feedback and groups. The difference is that Weight Watchers is a closed system, right? You have to join and it costs money. And these principles have been well known otherwise. Food diaries, really, it's been known to work. But the problem is food diaries, writing everything you eat down, only works for some people. It has a lot of friction, what we call a lot of friction. It means it's kind of difficult to do, takes a good deal of effort. Likewise, it doesn't really scale. So that the idea of it being a professional program that you have to join, there's not a lot of scale. It's a technological term meaning like digital cameras get cheaper, better every year. That's scaling. They're scaling to good. We want to be tapping these things. We want to be having less friction and more scale. This scales, right? This is my iPhone. I've loaded up with all these new tracking apps that have come out for the iPhone. There are thousands of them that help you track your progress, monitor your progress towards a health goal. It's very easy. The important thing is that these things have very little friction. And likewise, there are these other devices. There's this thing called a Fitbit. That's a little accelerometer you can wear on your waist. It tracks your calories consumed, it tracks how much you're exercising, and it has this little flower. You probably can't make it out, but it has a little flower that grows the more you move. It's like a game, right? It's just like the way some of you probably have Priuses. When you drive your Prius, you want to get the best possible mileage, and you play with the little outputs there. We try to drive our cars to great mileage. Why aren't we doing this for our health? Why aren't we engaging with the same information that's very simple, very, very easy, very cheap, to drive our lives, to improve our lives towards better health? So Nike Plus is another example, and I want to hurry up because I'm almost out of time. But these idea of feedback in groups, the reason they're important is because, especially now, is because they play on the same things that the internet is good at, the same things that information is so good at. Data and social networks are another way of talking about feedback in groups. So we're at this very amazing moment in history, I think, where the same things that are known to work in health are actually the same things that are known to work online. The same things that are actually incredibly cheap and powerful. So I want to leave you with a few ideas. Data means more than when it's our data. So that cacophony of information that I started talking about, all that information, when we're able to connect that kind of generic information with our personal health information, when we're able to personalize it, we can get more specific guidance, more specific feedback. We tend to actually makes an emotional connection with us. And we tend to make much better decisions because of it. And likewise, I want to leave you with this idea that every decision counts. So that's really what I mean by a decision tree, if you were wondering when I was going to get to the whole decision tree idea. We are making a multitude of decisions in our lives, right? There's no end of decision making. We don't necessarily think about it, though, right? We decide what to eat. All of us just had lunch, and we had to make a little decision between the chicken sandwich or the tuna sandwich. That was an important decision for some of us. We probably didn't think of it that way. There are all these decisions that we can start making, start driving towards better health, start engaging with our lives, and start actually enjoying our lives and thinking of our health in much more positive and empowering terms. Thank you very much.